Hi, everyone, and welcome to another day of the AI Infused Classroom Summer Learning Series. And this time I have a good friend, Sam Kary, coming at us to talk about AI and lesson design. And I'm super excited. Sam, do you want to give a little more information about who you are?
Sure. I am the founder and CEO of New Ed Tech Classroom. And I don't know if you know this, Holly, but I'm actually returning to the classroom. So
I,
I was a classroom teacher for 10 years, and I'm returning to the classroom this year to be a digital media teacher and to also start up a maker space. So I'm super excited about that. And yeah, I'm just really passionate about project based learning, universal design for learning, integrating technology in meaningful ways, and helping other teachers do the same thing. So, yeah, I'm going to share some of what I've been experimenting with. This is very much in experiment mode
very
with how to use ChatGPT for the purpose of lesson design through some prompt engineering. And everything that I'm going to share, I will also include a link to. And because there, some of it are, they're going to be some kind of long templates, and you can just literally take them and copy and paste them. And I found they get pretty decent results. So let's see what happens. We'll try to do it live and see if we can get it to produce what we want. You ready for me, Holly? Okay. All right, cool. So, um, this is first of all, before we get started, everybody's talking about Chat GPT, as rightfully so, right? As generative AI. It is generative AI, but I also think that a really effective way to think about it is more like a remixer of information. I don't know about you, Holly, but I've found that the writing that it generates is not always the most amazing writing. I feel like at this stage, it hasn't impressed me a ton in terms of its ability to like really generate awesome writing. But what has really impressed me is its ability to remix information. And I think that's actually right now where it can act as a really powerful tool for educators, particularly in the realm of lesson design. And so what we're going to be looking at today is really based on this idea of how can we have ChatGPT essentially bring lots of different pieces of information together. And I think it's really important to know just some very, very, very basics. Not going to go into details about it, but just how it works. And basically, that it is a very, very sophisticated word association tool. So it is essentially looking for the words that you are giving it in a prompt, and it is pulling from high frequency occurrences of those words with also some randomization built in. And that's how it's able to produce what appears to us like original, and it is original creative writing. But when you know that, it becomes really important to be specific. And so that's what we're going to look at today, is how we can kind of use some keywords and specificity to help direct the model to what we're looking for so that we get back a more precise result. So I have been experimenting with this lesson design method that right now, at least I'm referring to as the 5S AI lesson design method. And I'm just going to go over the steps really quickly and to give you like a broader sense of what it is. And then I thought, Holly, we could just like play around with it and see what we can get it to do.
okay.
So the first step is to sequence from broad to narrow. This is actually just a perspective. It's not even a prompt. The next set is a set the table prompt. And when you see it, will probably looks familiar if you're familiar with some prompt engineering frameworks. Then specializing for the lesson, which is really about honing in on a particular lesson that you're working on, structuring the output, and then suggesting revisions. Although these are sequenced in numerical order, at any point, if you're noticing anything that you would want to revise in particular, it's a good idea to revise as soon as possible. So you can always suggest revisions, say after step 2, for example.
Okay.
So the first is, again, just a perspective about how to think about prompt engineering, how to think about getting AI to generate what you want. And that is to start from broad to narrow. So really to think about your prompts as though you are basically like a big, huge funnel. So in the sense of lesson design, this would look like you would want to start with having it generate like a lesson outline to begin. Then if you're doing backward planning, then you might want to start with something like an assessment rubric. And then from there, you could go with step-by-step instructions for how to complete that rubric. And then you could start to get into specific activities. So instead of starting with, let's create the step-by-step instructions, you can, if you start broad, you can actually get it really to begin with like a long-term plan and drill all the way down to the level of the specific resources that you would need for a single lesson.
So are you talking about like thinking in terms of UBD and looking at a UBD almost template and saying, helping it fill that in?
Yeah. And in fact, you can, if you want to use understanding by design,
Okay.
you can ask it to generate information about that. And that actually gets to the next step,
Okay.
which is the set the table step. Oh, and by the way, just a fun fact, all the images that I used in this are all AI generated. So I generated these using Midjourney, which I love. I'm not nearly as proficient in with Midjourney yet, but it's fun. So this is my this is my robot in front of a banquet, a banquet full of food. So the first and really this is like the mother of all prompts.
Yeah.
So this is going to be the gargantuan huge prompt, and the rest of them are not that necessarily all that involved. But this is going to be the big one. Now, this is so you typically are going to see this type of recommendation where you're going to assign a role, and I'll show you some suggestions for what you could do for that. You want to give it a clear task, a single task to start. And then we're also going to use a strategy where we're going to ask the AI to generate as much information as possible about whatever it is that we want in our lesson. So again, if you're thinking about like bring all the food out to the table, and the reason for that is because we don't want to get in and like be eating the meal, but then realize that actually they brought us out steak and we're vegan or something, right? So we want to have everything laid out so we can see it and make any corrections, make any suggestions up front, because essentially the way that it's working, the way it remembers is that it's constantly pulling information in from previous instances in the conversation. So we want to make sure it's correct up front. And this will also help us just make sure that it is really finding like in the needle in the haystack for those specific lesson components that we're looking for. So I have some few things here. And again, this is it's going to look there's a lot here, but again, this is something I'll provide. So no need to, this one's not a ton, but no need to like memorize it all. So for role ideas, a lot of people, you'll see, you might just put, you might just put something like a teacher, but actually if you put keywords like an innovative curriculum designer or an award-winning or multi-award winning teacher of the year, that actually does direct the model to more specific instances of, or word associations with those particular descriptors. So you can use modifiers with roles, and you can also get the AI to play the role of somebody as long as there's enough information about that person prior to 2021 on the internet. So for example, if you want it to design a lesson from the perspective of Maria Montessori, right, or Piaget or Holly Clark. So you could say, hey, and just to clarify, because there are other Holly Clarks, so you could clarify, like the author of Google Infused Classroom. And that is going to help us, it's going to look in particular places, like where's Holly's name, look for probably the types of lessons that we want it to generate. Now, for lesson components, this is where it gets into a lot. You could really pull in a ton. I gave here some examples of what you might want it to generate, kind of keeping in mind that if you just tell it to generate a lesson plan, it's not by default going to generate the type of lesson, Holly, that you and I want it to generate, right? So if we want it to say incorporate the ISTE standards, for example, then you have to name that, right? You need it to generate the ISTE standards up front. If you want it to use a particular framework like UDL, right, or SAMR, then you need to name that up front. If you want it to make sure it is a lesson that utilizes constructivism, right? So it's not that you have to have all of this. I'm not saying you could, and we could actually test it if you want, Holly, but you do want to be as specific as possible. Now, what I'm also using here, this is called few shot prompting, where I'm giving it some examples. So I'm cueing it a little bit when I say project-based learning, because you'll notice if you put in project-based learning, by default, it might say things like build a community garden or something like that. And if that's not what you're looking for, and you're looking for something that's technology integrated, for example, then you want to be specific about that. So again, it's about specificity and helping it kind of look for the needle in the haystack there. So these you could, like, if you wanted to use these and literally just copy and paste them, you could. If you wanted to modify them slightly, like let's say you have a preferred set of tools, or you do have an instructional method that you like, you could just change those in there as the example, and you could continue to use this over and over. So I just dropped in some examples
These are
that
all really good though.
would be applicable for me. Yeah.
I love all of these.
All right. So now, after you do this, it's going to generate basically, and also we're going to ask it to generate this in a table. So we're also going to
Okay.
specify the format, which is
Mhm.
another, just basically it's speaking the language of a computer. So the more you can help it organize the information, it likes that, and it tends to produce a better result, and it's easier to look at.
Mhm.
Now, what we're going to do in this next step, so we just got it to basically generate all this generic information, right? So we'll see it in a second, but it's going to generate all this information about like what is project-based learning. And now we want it to be specifically about a lesson that we're designing. So this is a relatively straightforward prompt. It's to add 2 columns. So the first column is specific to your lesson. So now you're going to say, for example, like I want a week-long 6th grade humanities lesson about ancient China's geography. And column 2 is something I've been playing around with that is really interesting.
Yeah.
And that is to ask it to justify its responses. So, we'll see it in a second, but when it's going to line up and it's going to say, I picked this project, and uh, because it's related to project-based learning with technology, and here's a justification for why. So this is another place to scan and just see, hey, do I want a revision after it produces this result? Because then I could go back and I could ask it, to change a particular component. Now the next is to, I don't have a nice image here because I have had some more I wanted to share. So the next is just to structure the output. And this is gonna be based on what stage you're at in that funnel. So if you are at the top of the funnel and you want it to produce just a lesson outline, you could ask it now to structure that lesson in a table using the 5 E's, or using explain, explore, or explore, explain, apply,
Mhm.
or using the hyperdocs method.
Mhm.
Or if you want it to generate a rubric, you can clarify you want that rubric organized in a table. You want it to be based on, what a 1 means versus a 4. It may actually come up. It's pretty smart, so it may come up with this itself. But if you want to give it the labels, then the chances you get a better response are better. And then if you want it to say generate like step-by-step instructions for students, you can also tell it to do so, formatting it with headers, with bullet points, with
Mhm.
emojis, and then it basically becomes something you can practically copy and paste and use. And then the last one is just to suggest revisions. So, like I mentioned, yes, this could happen at the very end, but I would recommend actually doing it as soon as possible. So, at any point, if you want it to elaborate, you can just ask, please elaborate on this, or please change this aspect. So, let's say it generates a project that you don't want, then you could ask it right there to revise that project so that it's not pulling the information that you don't want into like subsequent responses. So you should ask it to revise, or yeah, you should prompt it to revise its responses basically as soon as you notice something that you would want revised. All right, you ready to try it out, Holly?
I'm so ready. This is
All
so good.
right, cool. All right, so let's do, I have it pulled up in another document here. So let's start with the first one again, which is, well, the first is just a mentality of the funnel. So I think we can do basically what we said, which is start with an outline of a lesson, then we can have it identify, like create a rubric for the assessment, and then we
Mhm.
can have it generate some step-by-step instructions and then some specific activities, things like that. And if you have any ideas, Holly, let me know. So let's start with a set the table prompt. So we're going to do play the role of blank, tasked with creating a blank. Holly, do you have a do you have a role you want to give it?
Actually, no. So let me see, play the role of and creating. So are we in the still designing a lesson phase?
Yeah. So this is sorry. So the task is going to be we'll just do an outline.
Okay.
So we're going to start at the very top. So creating an outline
And I
of
just
a
wanted to
lesson.
say something while you're doing this, and that's where I
Yeah.
got caught off when you asked me. What I have noticed is that when I'm talking to people about AI, even on this little series, that they always have like it on a document. So I think that a thing we're going to want to start to do is have some of those favorite prompts on a document that we just cut
100%.
and paste over. And I'm
Yes.
seeing that a lot.
Yeah, and that's something I'm working on as well as organizing this stuff in like a Notion database that's actionable.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I think personal knowledge management is actually critical to being able to use any of this because you need to store it. You know, that could be a Google Doc too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I store mine in Notion so that I can just easily copy and paste them.
So
So for now, we're just going to start with the role. So we could do, you know, we can use some creative modifiers as well, like innovative curriculum designer, or we could have it play the role of a particular person. Do you have a
yeah,
preference?
I liked when you said I'm an award-winning teacher.
Okay. All right. So we'll do an award winning teacher. Whoops. Can't type right now. Now comes what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just copy and paste the lesson components. And if we want to change any of these, then we can do that. But I'll start with all of these basically. So we're going to go with, where did I put that? Hold on. It's like in a different document. I have like the problem is I've been messing around with so many versions of this. I have like lots of, I have this one. Okay, here it is.
Oh, I get it.
All right. So we want it to basically generate information that we would want, right? In a table. Now, you know, we might not want all of this. And in fact, we don't want all of this. So we don't want it to say like topic DNA replication and geography of ancient Egypt, right? Like I'm just giving examples to you all for what you
Mhm,
might include there.
mhm,
So let's just say, for example, we'll take off ancient, we'll just do ancient Egypt. We could change it to just blended learning.
mhm.
I'm just going to do, I don't actually know that this is correct. So I'm just going to do the NGSS standard there.
Okay.
And we can stick with ISTE standards
Yeah.
as well for students. I think just for the purpose of this one, because if we start putting tons of this stuff in there, you know, it does get there is kind of a cap, you know, so I'm going to take this off for now. And I'm also going to take off educational theory. I really only included this to show
Yeah.
that depending on how you look at things, how you, view things, you could like approach it from that angle. Now, essential question, I'm just going to say like, yeah, we can leave it here. And just as kind of a general example of what I'm looking for, project-based assessment, I'm going to still leave this with examples just to see. So I'm not picking one of these yet, if that makes sense. Okay. I think we can probably just leave this right now the way it is and see what happens.
Okay.
Anything else you want to add?
No.
Okay.
This does.
All right. Okay. So we're getting our table.
Which is much nicer than you would normally get. That was
Yes.
good call.
Yeah. So even just that move right there is nice
Uh-huh.
for getting it, to be more readable. And then it becomes something when you copy, if you want to copy the prompt,
Did a
it's much
really
easier to use.
and it
Um,
did that essential question. That's what I wanted to see based on your EG, which is
yeah. So
like,
it's interesting. So it actually, and I haven't even asked it really. I mean, I did tell it that it was going to be geography of ancient Egypt here. So I am kind of already getting specific, but it actually was smart enough to generate, look, it generated an essential question. I think in this case, what I actually wanted it to do was generate more generic information about what an essential question is. So I think that's something that I'll have to,
Refine.
I've been tinkering with different ways to get it to kind of produce what I want. This is not bad. And by giving it those other examples, I was trying to guide it toward the types of like
Mhm.
enduring understanding essential questions. Cause sometimes you'll see some essential questions written that are just not exactly what I'm looking for
Yeah.
there. Um, so this is interesting. So for project-based assessment, like let's look back. So I gave it examples, right? Publish a digital book or create a green screen video. I did not suggest to do a digital interactive map using Google My Maps, right? But that is something that you could do.
Huh.
Um, so that's great, right? So already it used that example, and I guarantee you, if you were to just put this in and say project-based assessment and not give it any kind of example like that, it's almost certainly not going to give you the Google My Maps
No,
example. It's
correct.
going to give you something that's not technology. It's not involving technology integration. So again, that's an example of like pointing it toward a word pile essentially, and it sees like, oh, green screen videos
Yeah,
and digital books, like that's within a particular purview where we're going to go look,
yeah,
right?
because it was an example of
Yeah,
digital whatever. Yeah, that's
exactly.
really interesting, actually.
Exactly. So that's why for personally, an individual, it's a good idea to kind of work on the examples here that you would want to
Yeah,
give it, because if you have a particular thing you're looking for, then it's going to again drive
yeah.
it to finding that type of response.
And
So
this is a teacher who is well versed in pedagogy. Like, this is not, and I don't want to say it's not your teacher paid teacher, because the teacher paid teacher could be well versed in pedagogy as well. But this is like, we're getting down and dirty with some of these. And that's what I like about this.
yes, yes, and I'm trying to build these so that you could copy and paste this. So even if you
Oh,
don't
for sure.
know
Yeah,
necessarily what this is, um, you can still like you can use this and it's going to give you a much better response. And yeah, I mean, you may still have to, you're still
yeah,
going to have to figure out how to do that stuff, but um, it's by default, it's going to end up generating a higher quality, more innovative lesson for
yeah.
you than it would had you not done
Yeah,
this.
that's what I'm saying. And if you
Yeah.
go down to the bottom, well, you're going to say something right here, because I'm curious about, in the Project Zero part, it said to do See, Think, Wonder, which I love.
Yeah.
Um, and how do we get out of it? Do you, in the active participation, more activities? Is
Yeah,
it?
so this is just at the generic, like the beginning of the
Oh,
funnel.
right,
And
right.
so we can continue to hone in and then get it now to about whatever we want here. We could get it to start to specifically generate ideas for See, Think, Wonder. We could say, I've actually, Holly, it's funny, I'll put a block on it that will say anything but See, Think, Wonder, only because it's the most common, and I want it to pull compass points
Yeah,
or think,
yeah,
puzzle, explore, just to provide more variety.
yeah.
And so that's something you can do as well. You can say like anything but this if you don't want it to do that.
And
Um,
this ed tech tools, if teachers would have had exactly what it's saying right here during the
yeah,
pandemic, we would have
right.
been so much better off.
Yeah, right.
I agree with all of those.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's what's cool is that it's suggesting some that I did not give it, so if you
Yeah,
look back up here, I said, for example, and again, I'm thinking it's not because I only want those tools, it's because those tools exist within a particular
yeah,
word pile out there in the internet. And so it's going to look for associated tools. And actually, I've tried it without this, and it it doesn't do that. It'll say things, and this is not a knock on like Prezi or anything, but it'll recommend more tools like that as opposed to, I think, what we think of as more education technology specific tools. So again, this is an example of how you give it some examples, and then it's going to generate
I
something
love
more
this.
precise.
Brilliant.
Now I do want to show something. So you mentioned, or we were talking about the project-based assessment, right? Google My Maps. Now, this could be a place where I'm noticing I may want to make a revision. I do like Google My Maps, but I also like Padlet's Map Maker. Now, if I have that knowledge, right, then I can just add a revision prompt here to say, revise the projects to use Padlet's map function instead of Google My Maps. And then that will just revise that. So basically it's going to be the same exact thing, except now I'll get the Padlet map. Now, that again is important that I'm doing it at this step, because let's say next I want to start to get into some more specific aspects. Well, actually, we're not going to do that quite yet, but well, yes, we will. When we have it start to say build out a lesson sequence, we want it to be pulling in the tools and the project that we want. So if at any point you notice things here, then this would be a place. You could also say generate a list of other types of thinking routines and suggest other ones that might work. So there's all kinds of things you could do here, right?
I just am going back to understanding by design, which for people who are watching and might not know what we're talking about, it's a learning framework that starts with the end in mind, done by Jay McTighe and Grant Wiggins. And it was just the foundational part of my growing up as a teacher. I did it all the time, but it was very time consuming and hard to do. And sometimes it would take me an entire day just to do one.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking at this and I'm like, I could have done this in 15 seconds. And I think that this is the beauty for teachers that they need to understand.
And we're just getting started. Wait until
Yeah.
you see what it does. Like it's gonna blow your mind.
Yeah.
It went like I know Holly, but like this stuff it's crazy. So I know we're at I'm already hitting
I
like
don't even care.
so here let's go to the next one. So now we're gonna do some specifics. So this is step 2 or step 3. I'm sorry. So now it generated some generic information. It did also generate some specific stuff, but that's okay. So now what I want it to do is add 2 columns to the table. So it's going to add a column. I'm asking it to add a column that is now specifically about this lesson. So I want to do a week long, and I know I already told it this, but we'll specify again, 6th grade humanities lesson about ancient Egypt's geography. Okay. And then we're going to do in the second column, justify your response. I just modified this prompt, so we'll have to see how it turns out. It's a live demo. Okay, yeah, it's doing what I was hoping.
I love it.
So this is you hear about AI hallucination, and that basically means that essentially it's trying to follow your instructions all the time. So if you ask it to do something and it doesn't know how to do it, it will still go out and try to find or it will make up an answer. And this is a way to kind of fact check it. So when you ask it to justify itself, that's a way to verify that its logic is sound. So this is also a good time, particularly if you're doing long-term planning, unit planning, to check the justification, make sure it looks good to you. And then again, you could ask for revisions at this point if you wanted.
And had you brought in constructivism and connectivism, which you had earlier, I think it would, even in the justification, maybe talk about constructivism, which would have been interesting.
Yes, it definitely would. Yeah.
Mhm.
And in this, it may not have been a bad idea to do that, given that I know that later I'm going to ask it to develop a 5E's lesson plan that I want. And I want it to incorporate constructivism in that.
But Sam, this is the new PLC. This
Yeah.
is what you need to be doing. I'm not a PLC fan per se, but I know that they're everywhere.
Yep.
So this is what we should be doing together at a table.
Totally. Yeah, I know. Yep. it's immensely powerful. It's really
Mhm.
cool. Um, and I'm sure that I know that there are a lot of tools that are coming out that are in beta that are essentially more for teachers like ISTE and ISTE just announced one, right? And so there will likely come a time when we don't have to prompt engineer this much to
Yeah,
get this
yeah.
kind of output, but at least now
It's kind of
we
fun
do.
though
It is actually it's fun because
for
you can
us
still play the
pedagogists.
role of a
Yeah,
lesson designer. You're still a lesson designer that's creative, but you're not doing all this legwork, you know, which would be ridiculous to do, right?
which I did. You did.
I know for sure. Okay, so now I'm gonna do the structure prompt. I love this one. This is one of my favorite ones. I love getting it to like produce different types of structures. This is a very simple prompt, but this is now just to for lesson, this lesson outline, structure. I'm just going to put structure it using, and then this is where, because again, we're still at the higher level of an outline, I'm going to say using the 5 E's lesson. Actually, I have it over here. Hold on. Let me just grab it. So I'm not, we'll do a table using the 5 E's
Oh, I love
like
this.
this. Structure it as a table.
This is gonna be the best session at like an ISTE. Like sitting down with people and having them play while you go through this.
Yeah. I know it's pretty exciting. The first time I got it to do this, I was pretty pumped.
Yeah,
And this one, you know, you can, so the prompt I just gave it is very straightforward. This like for this lesson outline,
mhm,
just to, so there are ways that you can do this in a much more specific way. So you can tell it. I thought it would be a little bit too much right now, but you can say like in row one, column one, and I have some templates for that as well. Like I want the essential question in this row. I want
mhm.
the objective in this one. So it's organized exactly the way you want it. You know, you can tell it like I want it in a 6 by 6 grid with this and this and this. And I have these long prompts that I built like that that I'll include that kind of stuff too. So nobody else has to replicate that. But I just didn't want to kind of drop in this like gargantuan
Continues to
prompt and scare people.
justify, sorry, it continues to justify. It's just following from the prior,
Yeah. And
which
so
I'm good with.
this is interesting. Like it's saying here, so I like the explore looks good. Explain, provide more detailed information. Okay, this is okay. I might,
Yeah,
you know, we could refine this maybe with some like incorporate flipped instruction or like
yeah.
stations based instruction here. This one, the task of now it's writing an essay. And so I think I'm going to give it a revision to revise uh, the elaborate phase to solely be about creating a digital map, then make the evaluate phase a self assessment and
Mm,
reflection activity in I have to put Flipgrid. Sorry, Flip, because
I know.
they won't know what I'm talking about in Flipgrid, and have students add to their digital portfolios. So this is where, yeah, to kind of have some knowledge about the type of lesson design you want is going to improve your ability to communicate with it and get it to revise. Because as you can see, it didn't quite do what I wanted. You know, the elaborate phase really shouldn't have been write an essay because we already determined what the assessment was going to be. And this would actually be a reason potentially now that I'm seeing this. I don't feel just even based with what it's saying here, like continue with the development. I feel like it's not fully understanding what I want it to be doing for the elaborate phase, which is like that's the demonstrating your understanding with higher order thinking. And so that would be a justification actually to have it generate information about the 5Es like in the very beginning. And sometimes I do that too. So you can fact check it. But you
And
can see still it's giving a pretty solid response here.
I think anyone who's watching this should have another tab open and be trying some of the same thing as we work
Totally.
through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and try it with your own stuff and experiment
Mhm.
with changing out different words and things like that. Okay, so now this gets to we have a basic outline. So I think this is also a really fun part where now you can start to have it do different things. So for example, we can say, let's copy this one. And now we'll say, so now I'm basically back at the top, right? I'm back on my funnel, but now I'm going to move down the process and I'm going to do this a little bit faster. I don't have to do, set the table and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but now I'm going to go to the next task. So now I want it to now generate a rubric for the Padlet digital map, organize it in a table by criteria. And we'll do like this one, like this. Okay. Let's say actually now generate a rubric. Let's see if we can ensure the rubric includes the uh, standards. What did I say? The HSS standards.
I think
And that, what happened there? Is that what it was? Okay, I'll just say that it includes the standards and the history, social, and ISTE
ooh,
and relevant. We'll see if it can do it. Relevant ISTE student
student.
standards. So it should be pointing like creative
Yeah. Knowledge
communicator, things like that,
structure.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and I could again check that. We could check that back in the beginning to see what it says. Okay, understanding of geography. This I don't like.
Yeah, me either. And I think a regular teacher, well, they're saying that's ISTE standards. Huh.
Yeah, so this again would be a good place. Now, this is also an opportunity to show how, you can just say like ISTE student standard. So you can go over here and if it's not giving you what you want, but you know that you want it to be pulling in creative communicator,
Right.
then you can just go here and you can now bring this in and say, like, incorporate creative communicator. And then it should just revise it using that standard. So again, it's an example of how any moment where you allow it to kind of start to get generic, it seems to
Yeah.
tend toward the generic.
Yeah.
And if you want it to start to be more specific, then you have to prompt it to do that.
Mhm.
It does look like even here, I guess it did say digital citizen before, but it did it not just with one, but with another one. Now, even better than what I did, if you had an example of one that you'd already created that was exactly the way you wanted it to be, you put that in. And that's what I mean about being a DJ. So you put in one that you created for another context, and then you say, now, use that same structure and criteria and like rebuild the rubric based on the one that I just made or the one that I just gave you. And that is always going to produce a higher quality result. Now, I want to show you something cool that I figured out, Holly. So I'm kind of jumping now to thinking about, let's say we know students want to make a digital map in Padlet, right? And I need to give instructions to students. Now, yes, of course, I could give them a screencast,
Mhm.
but I also perhaps want to give them some written instructions with like links and things like that. Now, that of course that takes a long time to do, to produce like step-by-step instructions. You can get it to do something really cool here. So if you say to generate, we'll generate oh, actually I have it here. Step-by-step instructions. So we'll do step-by-step for how to create a digital map in Padlet. And I'm going to say, though, I'm going to add this: use relevant examples from the project, so that it's not just generic. I'm trying to get it to push, don't just give me generic information, but give me actual examples that would pertain to ancient Egypt's geography, like in the instructions that it creates, and do so in a well-formatted, fun, looking document. So you can see right up front, like it's saying, here's a guide to creating a digital map in ancient Egypt's on ancient Egypt's geography. It's clearly kind of targeting that to a middle school.
On this stuff.
Now I love this. So check this out, Holly. Like, add locations on the map. It's not just a generic explanation. It's actually giving an example that is accurate based on the geography of ancient Egypt. And it's kind of crazy. I never told it that I wanted it to do things like, create add text to it to justify the significance of the Nile River. I mean, what I got it to generate here, this is almost identical to a project that I did with students that it took me like 7 years to develop.
And when I first got my first job back in like 2005 or something as a technology integration specialist, the person I worked for wanted me to make these for teachers all the time. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
And I found ways to not do them because this took so long.
Right.
Now, oh my gosh, mind blown.
Look at this is interesting too, that because we emphasize the ISTE student standards, and they actually had that as part of the rubric here about citations and ethical use, that shows up here in the instructions as well. So where was it? It's important to credit your sources. In the comment section, add a citation. Now, this could be another place. Like if we wanted to say here, I'm just going to copy and paste that and copy and paste it down below. And I'm going to say elaborate on how to do this. So if at any point you want it to, we could maybe generate a whole other step-by-step thing. We could take this now. And so this is actually, it's turning this into a whole like step-by-step instructional thing. I could do lots of things with this now. So maybe I don't actually want to give this as a handout, but I do want to turn this into like a Google slide. So now I can say, reformat this so I can easily use it to create a Google slide presentation for students, include formative assessment questions I can add to my slides in Pear Deck.
Oh my gosh. I was wondering if you're gonna
I don't even, I'm just fooling. So that's what I just riff off of it, I can see what it can do. We'll see what I don't know. Is it doing that? This is not so good.
But I wonder if in Magic presentation in Canva.
Yeah.
Or CuraPod, if we could get more out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, is there's so many things, so many tools. A lot of the tools I've found are still a little bit rudimentary. Like they still just need some work. They're a lot of the slide. I've played around with a lot of the slide generating tools, and they're pretty basic. not the types of slides that a lot of teachers are creating with these really cool slide decks that, are coming from Slides Mania and stuff like that. And so there's so many awesome templates that you can find on Slide Carnival and Slides Mania that I think I can't see a lot of like teachers using the auto generate slides quite yet, but it's also important to remember that this stuff is really new.
Yeah.
So it's going to get a lot better soon.
And that's why for me, like you love Midjourney. There's all of these other things that we could play with. I want teachers personally, in my perfect world, to get used to ChatGPT and exactly what you're doing right now. Understand how to get to the next level to funnel this experience. Then let's go over to Midjourney and apply those skills, or go over to Dolly or wherever we go. But first, stay here for a second.
Oh yeah.
What I'm saying to teachers. Like,
Yeah.
don't get all shiny bell.
Yeah. Yeah. And I still use ChatGPT as the home base. So even when I'm using those other programs, I have ChatGPT generate my image
Yeah.
descriptions that I go plug in to
Yeah.
Midjourney. But yeah, I agree. And a lot of it is about experimentation and playing with stuff. But when you use these, this one didn't go quite as well. I was trying to riff off of it, and I probably just need to give it some more criteria. I have gotten it to generate better responses than this, and there are also plugins and stuff too. So you can use plugins to get it to generate like charts and things like that. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. But yeah, as you can see, I mean, if we just look at just the basic thing that was created here, like we basically have a 5Es lesson plan. We have step-by-step instructions for the project. We have a rubric for the project. And that can all basically be done by taking these prompts and just changing a couple things in them and like copying and pasting them in. So my hope, people are talking about it as a great equalizer. I hope it also is an equalizer in terms of like
Lessons.
bringing up the level of lesson design, because now there's a way to do it where you don't, it doesn't have to be as time consuming. And it doesn't have to be something where you must have all this specialized knowledge either. So I'm really excited because like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going back into the classroom, but I also have this kind of like open slate to do all this stuff that I want. So I'm going to be doing all my own curriculum development. So I'm definitely going to be using it to experiment and see what it can do in a realistic way.
But if you think about this, so we've been recording for a little over 40 minutes. That's a PLC period.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
so now we have this thing that the team can go and personalize on their own, but we've gotten something major, and we haven't done that before. Let's be honest, in those PLC periods.
Sure.
So
And schools can build them, right? So a school can design some prompt templates then that no, that's our methodology, or these are our school goals. And we want those to be plugged in there and left in there in the same way that I have these, that basically set up the way that I want them set up. Right. But a school and teams of teachers could set these up, particularly up here, because really the whole lesson is based on this, which is just a copy and paste thing. So spend some time to develop this and figure out what you want in your lessons. And you can produce a lot of stuff really quickly.
So is this in the course that you just produced, this kind of thinking?
This kind of thinking, yes. So the course covers really 3 main buckets. It's called Getting Started with ChatGPT for Teachers. It covers basically like all the ins and outs of using ChatGPT. So there are some little things that are good to know about just using the interface, and that like the differences between GPT-4 and 3.5 and why you would want to consider it. And then there's a section where I use several different simulations and interactive activities to understand how it works, which I think, so my awakening with it came from understanding how it works. So once you understand the way that it basically is generating information, that wasn't a huge aha moment for me in terms of understanding how I needed to ask it to give me information. And then the last section is about just what I call 4 pillars of prompt design. So it gets much more in depth in to task prompting. So lots of different examples about different tasks you can ask it to do. Much more in depth about role prompting, why it's important, and different examples of the different types of roles. It gets into formatting specifics, and I show basically every type of format that you can
Mm,
ask ChatGPT to do. There's also a section that basically covers all of what I refer to as like ChatGPT's skills.
mhm.
So, we look just here at basically one skill, but it has all these different things it can do.
Cool.
So we look at that as well. So it's a little bit less specifically targeted to the lesson design aspect, but um, I'm actually working on a resource where I'm housing this kind of stuff with some examples, and that will eventually get like attached to the course as like a bonus.
Okay.
And then the other thing that about the course that I did is I basically built the entire thing with AI tools. So I AI dubbed my voice.
I saw
I
that.
created all kinds of different AI, like just I have like AI modified images. I have different AI generated videos, AI generated characters, things like that. And part of it is, just to have fun and to be engaging, but it's also because yes, ChatGPT is like the center of a lot of this, but there's really this whole world of generative AI, and I wanted people to see it and kind of understand it and see what's going on out there as a way to give people kind of a better sense of just where we seem to be headed inevitably, right?
Right. And the link to that course is going to be underneath this video, along with all of your information. And I'm super excited for people to have a resource like you can see how Sam thinks about this and talks about it. So I'm sure it is amazing. Anything else coming down the line?
We got a lot of exciting stuff. Yeah, we are about to release an updated version of Next Generation Teacher. I won't say a ton about that, but we're really excited about where it's going, and think we have some really exciting content that I think people are going to find valuable for our training program.
Well, that's awesome. And I'll put a link to that as well. So, is anything else that are we good with this? Like, do we do it all?
I'm no, of course. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that
First,
that a person could do. And as somebody who has literally been, as I know you have been, just in this like deeply
yeah,
immersed in it, I know even for myself that it's changing so fast. There's so many updates happening all the time that it can be a little bit overwhelming. But I
mhm,
think my perspective about AI in general, and particularly like let's say you're a teacher that is maybe even more on the side of feeling just apprehensive about it, or feeling like I don't know how I'm going to address it with students. The best way to feel more confident and competent to be able to talk about it with students and understand what they might be doing with it and stuff is to start using it yourself and
yeah,
experimenting with it, and think of it as a tool, like a personal assistant tool that can help you with things. There's all kinds of stuff I didn't show, like how you can train it to learn learn your writing style and start to
yeah,
create emails or respond to emails and things like that. So a lot of stuff that is kind of a pain in the butt and takes a lot of time, that we can use AI to, like we saw here, to remove a lot of those responsibilities and hopefully lighten the load a little bit.
yep. Well, thank you so much, and all of Sam's information will be below. And I thank you for taking the time to do this for teachers, because this is totally free. You gave of your time, and so thank you so much for doing this today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, bye.
Bye.